Sarah Colnice said the average person walks about 27% of the speed of the average dog.
I could be a mess, stressed in yesterday. He don't care less, he sees me anyway. Yeah, he sees me anyway. My dog thinks I'm great, he thinks I'm number one. He never hates, even when I'm done.
This episode is brought to you by It Goes Without Saying, which will be held November 1st and January 10th at 11 o'clock. This is a presentation that I'm giving that hopefully will help you improve your relationship with your dog by understanding their language. It will be held at Waters Moss. The presentation does require pre-registration, and I'm just going to put the link in the description instead of trying to read it off because it's a little long and weird, but yeah, so we hope to see you there. So a friend of mine, Heather, posted this question asking about loose leash walking. This is something that I teach in my group classes. I want to kind of go over some of the stuff that's involved in that. I do have a video on loose leash walking, and I will put a link to that in the description also. Kind of shows how to use the techniques that I'm going to be talking about here. One of the things to keep in mind, Anders Hallgren did some research a few years back at the University of Oslo titled Back Problems in Dogs: Underlying Causes of Behavioral Problems. What this research found was dogs that have tension put on the neck, whether it's from leash corrections or pulling on walks or being chained out and just the dog putting that tension on the collar themselves, over 90% of those dogs had some type of neck trauma, whether it was esophageal or vertebral or the sympathetic nerve that has to do with eyesight runs through the neck. The thyroid glands are in the neck just like in people. There's some type of damage to these things. That constituted over 70% of all dogs that have some type of neck trauma. Those numbers to me are just staggering. We want to be really careful about how we're teaching this behavior and what we're allowing our dogs to do, as far as in this case pulling on the leash. The other thing we want to keep in mind is that the average person walks about 27% of the speed of the average dog. Dogs are just built better for locomotion. They're built better to move. And as they're getting ahead of us and as they're pulling on their leashes, it has nothing to do with dominance or hierarchy or anything like that. It's just they're better at locomotion. They're trying to get to where they want to go, and they have not been taught how to properly get to whatever it happens to be, whether it's just down the road to smell something or to pee on the fire hydrant or whatever. I always liken it to when my daughter was 2, 3, 4 years old. I'm taking her to daycare. I'm running late. I've got to get her inside. I've got to get her signed in so I can get to work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, would you hurry? And she's running for all she's worth. And I'm just like, oh, would you just hurry up, loping along? So it's the same thing for our dogs. They're waiting for us to hurry up. So I want to talk a little bit about equipment. The thing I recommend the most is getting a harness. If you're having a problem with a puller, a no-pull harness is the way to go. And there's two types. One of them is what's called a back clip harness. I don't really like this one so much. I have used them, or had used them, for several years, but I'll get into that in a minute. But as the name implies, the leash clips onto the back, and the idea is as the dog starts to pull, it lifts them up. They can't get to where they want to go unless they slow down and go at the pace that you're going. So the problem with that is the Sherpas, they call them, go under the arms, and that's what's lifting them up, and it can cut the circulation off, and that can cause some problems in and of itself, just like the collar can, or pulling on the collar. The other problem with those is if the dog is a really strong puller. If it's a larger dog, they can get some force behind them, and so there's not a lot of benefit to them. The other one, the one that I usually recommend, is what's called the front clip harness. It clips on the chest. It works on the principle that dogs don't have a lot of lateral strength, so from side to side. So if they start to pull, they actually get turned around away from where they want to get to. So they have to slow down, go at the pace that you have set. One of the things you want to be aware of if you want to use one of these front clip harnesses is there's some research that's been coming out. A lot of them, they have a strap that goes across the shoulder, and it inhibits a lot of movement, so it can cause some shoulder damage. So you want to make sure you get, I think it's called a Y-clip harness, that does not cut across the shoulder. So what I was talking about before, the reason I was using the back clip harness is a lot of the dogs I've had, they're very barrel chested, so if the collar part of it fits, the harness part is too small, and if the harness part fits, the collar is too big, and they just don't adjust to the proper size. So I've been kind of fidgeting, trying to find one that fits appropriately and is effective. The other one I want to talk about, it's a head halter. I think Halti was the first one that made these, or at least popularized them. The idea is, just like with a horse's bridle, once the dog starts to pull, again, because they don't have a lot of that lateral strength, it actually turns the head. So again, the body follows the head, like I talked about with the leaning a couple of episodes ago. And so they get turned around and they can't get to where they want to go unless they go at the pace that you've set. The problem with this is, like I was talking about with the collar and causing damage, if you have a dog that's lunging and their head gets whipped around, that can obviously cause a lot of severe damage if you're not really careful. So although I've used head halters in the past, in the over 15 years I've been working with dogs professionally, I've recommended them twice, and before that I used it once with one of our dogs that he would literally pull until his tongue turned blue if we let him. So the head halter is a tool, but you want to fade that out as quickly as possible in favor of a harness or just walking on a collar. Like I said, I'm a big proponent of the halters, but in the example I gave with Talbot getting out the front door, one of the third episode, or getting out the back door, you may not have time to grab treats and harnesses and clickers and all these things. So we want to make sure, like now we keep a leash fairly close to the door. I can grab a leash if Malcolm were to get out, and that's it, and I can bring him back with him just walking on a flat collar. So we want the dog to know how to walk on a flat collar, even if it's not your go-to for when you're going for your walks or something like that. The other thing to keep in mind with any type of training is, I always tell my clients, I've seen a house built in 30 minutes on television. We know it doesn't happen that way. It's the same thing with training. It's not exciting, it's not sexy, it's a lot of repetition and rote. You can make it fun, but it's gonna take time. So be ready to put the effort into it. The other thing I tell my clients is, you're going to practice the loose leash walking. You're not going to be able to walk across your living room and then go for a 30-minute walk with your dog in a loose leash position. Why would you want to? You think about when you take your dog for a walk, it's probably the highlight of their day. And we want to allow them that time to be a dog, to sniff, to pee on things, to roll in stuff if it's not too gross and whatnot. This is another one of those things I read a long time ago, and I can't remember who said it, or I'd give credit if I could remember, but taking a dog for a walk and not allowing them to be a dog is kind of like taking a kid to Disneyland and saying, okay, we're here, but you can't go on any of the rides. So we want to allow them, the dogs, that time to be a dog and to do dog things like sniff and roll and pee on things and whatever. A good example, I've taken Malcolm for a walk a few times where we might take 45 minutes to go 2 blocks, and that's it, because he wants to stop, he wants to smell, he wants to pee on things and do those dog things. And the walk is as much for the dog as it is for me, so we want to allow him to enjoy it as much as I am. My day job, I work at Parks and Rec, and a couple of our parks, I have dog parks at them. And one of the biggest problems I see is that the people are not present. So they'll walk into the dog park, they'll sit down at one of the picnic tables, they'll sit on a bench, pull their phone out, and they are not paying attention to their dog at all. The dog may be running up to them with a ball, they may be getting into trouble with one of the dogs that isn't properly socialized. They have no idea what's going on. So you want to be present. Be aware of what your dog is is doing. And this doesn't even get into if they're running up to people that don't care for dogs or they're being rude to the people. You want to be able to take care of that. When I go in with an 11-foot tractor, I want the person to be able to call their dog back and keep them away from me. The last thing, oh my God, it would kill me if I injured a dog while I'm on the tractor. I try to be very, very hyper aware of my surroundings, and if I was involved in that, I would probably quit my job. I mean, it would kill me. So I rely on the people to keep their dogs under control, at least enough that I can get in, do my job, make the place look nice for them, so that I can get out of there and they can go about their day and have a good time. So again, I can't emphasize this enough, obviously, because I keep going on about it, but be present, be aware of what's going on with your dog when you have them out, whether it's at a dog park or just for a walk or something like that. Everything I teach works about 80% of the time. I'm not one of these people that says, oh, this is the way it's done and you have to do it this way. Each dog learns a little bit differently. Each dog has that thing that they excel at and that thing that they need a little extra time to kind of learn. So this is not the end-all be-all, and like I said, I talk about this a little bit in the video, and again, the description will be in the link, or in the a link will be in the comments. There we go, so that I kind of illustrate how to do this. But the way I teach this, we have the dog on the left side, and the reason I do that is a lot of competitions require the dogs on the left side. It doesn't really matter if you just want to be able to take your dog for a nice walk and you want a well-behaved companion, but you do want to pick a side. So learning to do something on the left side is totally different behavior from your dog's point of view than learning to do it on the right side. So pick a side and stick with that. If you are planning on going into some of these exceptions, like, agility, rally, something like that, you want to be able to get the dog to switch, and what I recommend is starting with the dog on one side, make sure they have the behavior really well, and then switch to the other side, work on it so they have it well there, and then you can start trying to switch back and forth. As per usual, a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's kind of the idea and how you want to teach that. So I have the dog on the left. The visual cue is the leg closest to the dog. I talked about the stays a couple of episodes ago. You want to start with the right leg. In this case, you want to start with the left leg or the leg closest to the dog. You're going to take a step, and you're going to encourage them to kind of take that step with you. And then once they take that step, I like to put a sit. It kind of defines the end of the behavior, but it's also nice the dog knows or starts to learn when you stop, I sit. So that way, if you're, walking on a trail or something like that, and another dog comes running up, kids are running up, you stop, the dog sits, and it just makes them look a little more friendly, a little more attentive, a little more approachable. And if they're sitting, it's a little bit harder for them to get into trouble running up or jumping on someone or something like that. So again, left leg closest to the dog, or the leg closest to the dog, take a step, may have to encourage them a little bit, get them to take that step, then have them sit. As they get the hang of this, you take 2 steps and 3 and 4, etc., etc. And one of the things I do want to mention, it's really easy to talk through a lot of these behaviors and say, oh, you do this, and then this is the next step, and this is the next step, etc., etc. But when you're actually putting this into practice, when you're actually training the behavior, whether it's a sit or a down or a loose leash walk or whatever, you may only get 2 steps in that training session. And then the next training session, you're going to have to practice that a minute so the dog's like, oh yeah, I remember now. And then you can take 4 or 5 steps. So it's going to take several training sessions. The best loose leash walker I ever had, Talbot, that I've mentioned before, I had practiced 2-3 months pretty consistently with him to get him to walk on a loose leash appropriately. So be ready to put the time in. Like I said before, you're not going to be able to walk across your living room and then go for a 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. Another technique I will use, I call it toss and pause. We have a starting point. Take a treat, want to throw it far enough out that the dog can't get to it, but close enough that it's going to keep his attention. Then we're going to start to walk towards it. If the dog stays on a loose leash, we keep moving towards that treat until they get it. And usually there's a lunge at the end of it, and I don't mind that because they've made it to the treat, so it's all good. But up to that point, we want to make sure the dog's going at our pace. And then as they get the hang of it, you can toss that treat a little bit further and a little bit further. And if you're consistent with this, they're going to know to look for it. They're going to know to watch where that treat lands so that you can walk towards it. I will say in the video, kind of taught me a lesson. It looked nicer than where I usually train, but the problem was it has this nice oriental rug on it, and when I put the treat down, it was really hard for me to see it and for Malcolm to see it. And it took him a minute to sniff it out. So instead of just that walking towards it or walking on that loose leash, there was a lot of back and forth sniffing until he found the treat. So it didn't work very well. So be aware of your environment if it's going to be, conducive to using this technique. The other thing I want to mention really quick, Patricia McConnell, I can't remember if it was her doctoral thesis or what exactly, but the research she did for her degree, it was called The Whistle Heard Around the World. She went around the world and observed people working with domesticated animals, horses, cows, dog, and what she found was higher pitch, faster vocalizations encouraged the animals into action. So you think about a horse, it's that, or that gee, something like that, gets them to start moving. It's the same thing with our dogs. We're working on recalls here, or loose leash walking, and I say with me, something like that, something faster, something a little more higher pitched, etc. When we're wanting to slow down or stop, it's a much longer, lower tone. So with the horse, again, it's whoa. With our dogs, sit, down, that type of thing. So we want to use that to our advantage. The dogs are going to pick up on that. So even with the recalls, things like that, when we're calling the dog into action, we want to use that to our advantage. We want to use all the tools in our toolbox, including the reinforcers, including our vocalizations, including the fact that dogs are visually oriented. So, those visual cues as compared to auditory if you need to do that. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. Like I said, there'll be a couple of links in the description here. Go ahead and check them out. Look at them, see if they're helpful. Thank you for joining me. Follow me. Leave comments. It's a big boost to motivate me to keep doing this. It's very reinforcing for me. So comments and downloads really help keep me going. If there's anything you'd like to hear me talk about, leave a comment. You can email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.